Right then, hello and welcome to this video. I'm going to be talking to you about reflective commentary. Now, this is a topic that is likely to be of more interest to creative writers. However, it is also something that is a very, very useful skill for all English students, especially as you're all taking ideas into action. And you will be required to write reflectively for that portfolio. So, while the examples I'm going to give speak more directly to creative writers, bear with me, because this is important stuff. Right then. Here's the opening question. Why do we write reflective commentary? What is the point of doing this? There are lots of ways to answer this. The first is always, well, because I told you so. But the most important thing to remember is that reflective commentary is a way for you, as the writer, to think about how you have grown and developed and what skills you have gained over the process of writing whatever piece or engaging in whatever project. So it's a really necessary part of growth, and it's something that academics do as well. Here are some examples if you want to read how professional writers, very well-known, award-winning writers do it. All of these examples are in the library, and I specifically like Stephen King's because he's very honest about himself. But as ways of looking at how people do it, these are good ones. So the why bother? Let me just move my little head up here. So, the purpose of reflective writing is to assess your growth as a writer by documenting your writing and revision process, struggles and successes, past and future goals. As you'll see, I've put in bold some of the key terms. So, assessing growth, documenting, writing and revision, struggles and successes. When I'm looking at students who've written reflective work, I want to know what went wrong and what you did about it, because knowing how you handle change can be one of the most important ways of looking at how you've grown. And I'll just hold that there and we'll get to those examples. But do not think that because something didn't work, it's a failure. Failure is one of the most important ways to learn. And so it's really important that you remember that and that you keep in mind that failure, yeah, it didn't work, but you can learn from that. And this writing can be both formal and informal. By formal, we mean written down, this kind of thing that we're going to ask you to submit, but informal can be your own writings, your own diary, whether you keep a log of things that you're submitting to journals, for example. Is it successful? Why was it not successful? That's all really, really good examples of reflective practice. And the marker, that is the person who grades your work, uses these pieces to understand how you have developed your writing, and you need to use them for the same purpose. The other thing to think about is this term autoethnography. So auto to do with the self, and ethnography is a way of doing research that looks very much at community and community in situation. So autoethnography is a way of research, writing, story and method that brings the autobiographical and personal, that is, everything of me or of you, to the cultural, social and political. So, for example, autoethnographical research that I might conduct might look at my experience as a young white woman in the UK to the wider context of higher education. So it's looking at me in my situation and how that ties to the greater context. And it's a really good way of getting to understand where you sit in relation to massive national, international, transnational conversations about things like art and art process. So, this is taken directly from the major project, but for other modules there are reflective pieces, and they are usually 1,000 words. So you discuss what you feel you've learned over the semester. You should address the writing process, what influences on what you've chosen to write, where the ideas came from, and what research you might have done. Now, if your idea came to you in a dream, and you thought about it for a few weeks, and you did some research on, oh, I don't know, you dreamed about Malaysia, so you went on Wikipedia and looked up Malaysia, and then you looked at some photographs. That is absolutely fine. That is not a problem whatsoever. It came to me in a dream is a great reason to write something. Why not? So that's absolutely fine. And you should be quite open and honest about where you've done your research. If you're looking up anything, Wikipedia is absolutely fine as a place to start. If you're looking at setting a story in, I don't know, 19th century France, maybe you started with Wikipedia and then you went to some history sites, you watched a documentary, you watched a film that was set then, that's all absolutely fine. The process of revision. So what worked? What did you change? How did you change it? How did you engage with feedback? So did you workshop the piece in class? Did you then get some feedback from your fellow students? What did they say? How did you work with what they said to change it? And you should show a clear-headed understanding and appreciation of your strengths and weaknesses. Now, this is incredibly difficult, and trust me, we all struggle with this. But what this means is, if you write really good dialogue, if your dialogue is authentic and people read it and go, oh yeah, I feel like I'm there, that's fine, talk about that. If you really struggle with describing characters in a way that doesn't instantly go to their physical characteristics, talk about that. How you've learned how to change that, what you're going to do in the future to make sure that you can move past this perceived weakness. Absolutely fine. And you should also talk about what reading you've done. So those research ideas, cool, tell me about them. If you are reading sci-fi and you want to write sci-fi, so you thought, right, I'm going to read the greats. Tell me who you're reading and talk about why you chose them. Why did you choose to read, I don't know, Isaac Asimov to inspire your sci-fi piece? Why him and why now? And you should also include a bibliography, guidelines for laying that out. You can get through the library website. I'm not going to talk through this page. There are some quotations, some questions here that you might like to respond to. They are purely for your own use. They might jog a memory, they might jog some ideas. All of these slides will be up alongside the recording, so feel free to use these questions. A couple of notes. This is an academic piece of writing, so you should use a tone that reflects this. But you can still use I. In fact, you can use I, as far as I'm concerned, throughout all academic writing. Terms like I believe, I think, I feel, I don't care. They're not to be used in academic writing. So maybe don't include that. Size 12, double-spaced, consistent spelling, titles, standard essay stuff. Bear that in mind. Don't forget that this is still a piece of academic writing and you should still be conforming to all the usual guidelines. Okay, some examples. Some basic phrases and how you can make them more reflective and more useful. Readers said it was slow, so I cut out parts. Okay, that's basic. Classmate X, you don't have to name them, and several people agreed, the story dragged. The tone didn't match the action, and I had long wordy sentences when characters were running from the police. So you've identified exactly what the problem is, tone and action. An exact example, long wordy sentences, and what it did to the writing. It made it feel slow and surreal, so I trimmed the scene and changed it. Feedback, identification of what's going to happen, trim. Perfect. I turned it into workshop unfinished. And people gave me ideas for the ending. So I tried one, but I don't think it's working. Okay. How about, I tried X, I tried the ending being this way, but it didn't work. So I changed it so that this happens instead. And then I tweaked that, outlining each individual point, showing me the process that you went through in order to get to the finished piece. Much better. Okay. I've got 3 examples of reflections. Now, I'm using these with permission from students, and all of these pieces were submitted to the short story writing module, which ran a couple of years ago. And you can see the marks that they were given at the top. And I've highlighted the parts of each one that are most important, or most impressive. These will all be, of course, available to have a look at on the slides. So the first piece in my portfolio was inspired by choose your own adventure genre from childhood, particularly give yourself goosebumps. So clear understanding of where the idea comes from. I used a flowchart to map out the story arc, and I used online software, Inklewriter, to help me track narratives. So really, really clear, how is this person mapping it out? How is this person creating this thing in the first place? One problem I ran into was that the piece was deceptively ambiguous. So highlighting the problem and explaining what the problem was, if I had to do it again, showing how they would change it. So reflecting on what they could do differently. I like the tone. The voice was a typical American girl playing on stereotypes from the 90s, like Clueless and Buffy. So showing a strength and pointing out where the inspiration came from for that, and how they then change that to adapt into the piece that they're writing. Okay, for 65. For this module, we were set an assignment, blah, blah, blah. I know because I set it, so you don't need to tell me that. This can be divided up. Yes, I also know that. I wanted to push my self in terms of diversity. Great, fantastic. Really, really like this. The first story I began writing was The Game. This is the title of the piece. I, for some unknown reason, imagined that second-person writing would be the hardest. An assumption that they're then going to break down and discuss. Good, nice, I like that. Possibly because I hadn't done much work, blah, blah, blah. I didn't find it as hard as I originally thought. Good. I revised the narrative. Okay, fantastic. I would have liked more information on how that was revised. After positive feedback in class, I decided to stick to this genre. Okay. To make this a 75, we would have had more information about where the revision comes in and what kind of things were revised exactly. 55. Now bear in mind, 55 is still a solid mark, and I reiterate that I am using this with permission. This person didn't necessarily write the best reflection, but bear with me. I have not done any secondary reading. Therefore, I will not be including a bibliography. Okay, it's a bold admission, not one that I recommend you make. Instead, I drew inspiration from the vast amount of books and films I may have read. Well, put those in the bibliography. You've read them, put them in the bibliography, problem sorted. Due to personal issues, I have not been able to do this task to the highest standard I'm capable of. Okay, an understanding of situation being interfering with your work, that's good. I'm not taking marks off for that at all. I understand the weakness as my work is rushed. Okay. Aware of the weakness. I've struggled with formatting due to absence in lectures and seminars. Okay, again, maybe don't admit that, but good that the student is aware of where the weaknesses are and what they need to do in order to overcome it. Attend class. Containing the creativity and seemingly large ideas within the confines of a few thousand words has proven difficult. Oh yes, trust me, that is a very, very common problem. And we all appreciate that is an issue. Trimming your work down to within the word count is a problem, and it's something that comes up again and again. I like to write about action and situations that involve a great deal of stress. Therefore, my inspiration was to stare at the computer screen until an idea forms. Oof. If this is you, if you're really struggling, contact me. Contact your tutor, contact whoever. Come to the writing assistance sessions, the writing support sessions. I can give you 40 ideas for a story. There are lots and lots of things we can do to help you in this situation. Don't just stare at the computer screen until the idea forms. I know it might sound like the best idea at the time, but trust me, it's not. Okay. Hopefully, this has given you some ideas of the kinds of things that we're going to be looking at in a reflection. So all we need you to do, and it's really, really straightforward, is think about what you've written, where did the idea come from, and how did you polish the final piece? 3 things. And just write about the process. When you first read a reflection, it might sound clunky, it might read a bit kind of, well, it's not the kinds of writing that most people think is brilliant, a highly skilled writing, but it's necessary because you've got to get into the habit of thinking about your process and thinking about how you do it. This is all we're asking in a reflective commentary. That's it.